I want to talk about the Worlds too, because the Worlds yesterday were incredible.
Well, I mean, we also have to talk about, since Eric is always, we always go into music when we're with him, and the passing of the great B.B. King this morning
I know.
at the age of 89. It's the thing is I mean, I'm a little too young to appreciate, and I love some of his music, but he had more of an influence on the people that I hold up as guitar idols, Clapton and Hendrix and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. But he was a fantastic musician, and from everything I hear, a great guy. So it's sad, 89 years old, that B.B. King leaves us today.
You know who is the biggest expert on B.B. King that I know is David Schultz, my colleague at the Globe and Mail. I remember B.B. King was playing outdoors in Detroit one time when we were at a Stanley Cup final. So I'm going to say it was one of those Detroit-Pittsburgh years, and it was the same day as the NHL has a welcome reception right at the start of the thing. And so the option was staying at the NHL reception and drinking free beer, or going out to see B.B. King as part of a live summer concert set. And there was about 4 of us that bolted and saw it. And I mean, he was at that stage of his life where he had to sit to perform, and he had a lot of side musicians who were equally fantastic. But it was a beautiful night in Detroit, and it was really a wonderful experience. And you're right. I mean, he was a guy that that influenced so many people. And as I say, my colleague Dave Schultz, in the days of mixed tapes, I would send him stuff, and just about everything that came back had, a whole bunch of the collected works of B.B. King on it. So he will probably be in serious mourning today because of that.
Wow, that's something. That is something. Yeah, I'm such a talented guy, and it's one of those guys that feels like he's been alive forever. Like it really feels like I mean, he was, how old was he?
89.
89, yeah. So it definitely feels like it. But yeah, just because as long as I can remember, he's just always been. He's one of those guys like Chucky Checker or whatever. It just feels like they've been around since the beginning of music itself. The beginning of rock and roll itself.
And I believe he battled diabetes the last 20 years of his life. The adult onset diabetes. So,
That is tough. That's tough. Well, Ty Anderson. Hello, Ty.
Hey, what's going on?
Ty, you've never met Eric Duhatschek, I don't believe.
No, I don't believe so. Hi, I'm Ty.
Hi, I'm Eric.
Cyberly meeting each other there.
Yeah,
of course.
Cool. Fantastic. So let's start the show. We'll go in the order of, let's do Mike, Ty, and then Eric. Do that.
Okay.
All right. May 15th. Good God. Did you go to that festival, by the way, in Asbury? When is that festival, Ty?
That is tomorrow and Sunday.
That's
and
what I thought.
I am not going, unfortunately.
I
couldn't find anyone who wanted to go with. I mean, like Boston to New Jersey is not that bad of a drive. But it's just everyone. All my friends now are at the age where everyone's starting to have serious girlfriends, and they're like, I can't get that. I can't just leave for the weekend. I'm like, why not? Let's do that. So. Yeah, so I'm the lone bachelor basically, so it's very tough to do anything these days. But no, I wanted to do it really badly because I love Gaslight Anthem, and the Dropkick Murphys are playing too, so it would have been a good time. A lot of good bands that I like, but those are the 2 headliners, so I thought it would have been great to have gone, but just didn't work out.
When is Gaslight playing? Are they tomorrow?
I want to say they're Sunday night because they're the hometown
right,
band.
Right.
But I think the list is online. It's called Skate and Surf. The lineup is online. It has it broken down by day. You can get one-day passes for like $60, which isn't bad for all the music that's going on that day.
Yeah, it's at Asbury Park, so you can't beat that. I don't know. That's tempting. I might have to go Sunday night. We may have to. We're not nearly as far away. It's only about an hour for me, so.
Yeah, it's a little bit closer than I am.
Because Gaslight Anthem, I'm a big, my wife and I are a big fan. I know you're also a fan of Gaslight Anthem, Eric, right?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so I really wanted to see them. Again, they've been in Europe all year. All right, here goes. Ready? Let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, May 15th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Ty Anderson.
And I'm Eric Duhatschek of the Globe and Mail.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com and listening to it on Alpha Geek Radio, we're very happy that we've been set up a partnership that started this week with Alpha Geek Radio. It brings us into TuneIn Radio. It brings us into a lot of new places. So we love those guys at Alpha Geek. So go over to alphageekradio.com and check them out. Some of the best podcasts, I think, and that's how we ended up there, because almost every podcast I listened to that wasn't hockey related but was sort of like technology or geeky related was on Alpha Geek Radio. So I ended up going there and guesting on some of those podcasts, and then they said, hey, we'd like to do a sports podcast. So I jumped all over that. That's awesome. So we're really happy to be with Alpha Geek Radio. And I want to start today a little bit differently because we don't have a game, obviously, until tomorrow. We are going to get into our predictions for this round for sure. But I want to talk a little bit about the Worlds because yesterday, quietly, was one of the most exciting World hockey days that you'd ever see. I mean, I think it sort of went under the radar for a lot of people. But we got to start, Eric, with Jágr, because what Jágr is doing right now, I think is beyond monumental, and it's something. It might be one of the top. I know he's had so many highlights in his career, but this whole thing could turn out to be one of the top highlights of his career.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, first of all, I should preface by saying that if you've ever covered a World Championships in Europe, you come to appreciate it more than if you just sort of watch it from this side of the ocean. Because even in Canada, what ends up happening is that the NHL playoffs start and the World Championships are kind of on the side. So all the games are on television, but people sort of pay peripheral attention through the preliminary round because that's really all it is, and the Canadian teams are involved in the playoffs, and everybody is focusing inward. And then you get to a point where we are right now, where we're down to the Final Four, especially in Canada. All 5 Canadian teams that made the playoffs have been eliminated, and suddenly everybody sits up and says, "Wow." Canada's at the World Championships, and Sidney Crosby's playing, and Tyler Seguin is playing, and Claude Giroux is playing. Like, how did they get all these guys? So, first off, kudos to Jim Nill, the general manager in Canada, for being able to recruit players that you normally don't see playing for Canada at a World Championship. Generally, when you get to the point in his career where Sidney Crosby is at, or where Claude Giroux is at, they don't go to the World Championships. It tends to be almost, from a Canadian perspective and from the Americans too, a 23 and under tournament. And so, with the exception of a Drew Doughty here and maybe a goaltender there, Canada, all of the best available talent went over there, and so you watch the games. Like yesterday, they beat Belarus 9-0, and it was a dominant display. And this was the round that they haven't been able to get over. Canada, the last 5 years, has managed to have great preliminary rounds and mediocre results once the medal round started. So now they've set up, as you allude to, a semifinal against the Czech Republic. This is a dream for the organizers of the tournament. The only thing that could be better is if Canada played the Czechs in the final. But you've got the Americans and the Russians on the one side, and you've got the Canadians and the Czechs on the other. And I think back to the 1985 Worlds when Mario went over. It was in what was Czechoslovakia at the time, and it was before all of the various dissolutions of the Eastern Bloc states, and it was a war. And the Czechs won it of the Worlds that year, and it set off celebrations in the street. And so when you think about the great moments in Czech hockey, you think about the Worlds in '85. You think about the Olympic gold in '98 in Nagano behind Dominik Hasek, and depending on what happens in these next 2 games, this could rank as one of the great moments in that country's hockey achievement. And especially since I think the expectation around the hockey world right now is that the Czechs are kind of a waning power a little bit. That once the generation of players embodied by Jágr passes into retirement, how good are they going to be? There just hasn't been the next generation of Czech players. So I think that internally in Prague right now, this is seen as a last hurrah, and the fact that, as you point out, Jaromír Jágr at the age that he's at is playing at the level that he has. I mean, he's always been so motivated by playing for his country. I mean, the whole point of wearing the number has to do with the the revolution at the time, and he's a guy that has worn that Czech nationality on his sleeve from the very beginning until this stage in his NHL career. Owns the team in Kladno. It just he's Czech through and through. So that's a proud hockey nation that sees this as a once in a lifetime chance to make a splash on the international world, and good for them. I mean, I think that a lot of people in Canada hope the run ends in the semis, but it is going to be a great game to watch, and I think that arena will be hopping. And let's see. I mean, it might be one of the most exciting hockey games that's played in calendar 2015, and hopefully people all across North America will get a chance to see it.
I know, and that's why I wanted to talk about it because it is on tomorrow. It's like 9 a.m. tomorrow morning Eastern time, right? And it's on TSN and it's on I guess the NHL network here, or NBC.
NBC.
NBC, right? Sorry, it's also on the. It's also I've been watching them all online. So the NBC Live Sports app and TSN's online if you're in Canada. But
Well,
this is just. I mean, it's. Go ahead, Mike. I'll let you go first.
Well, no, I was just gonna say it's like it's funny because I mean, and I'm sort of guilty of it myself because I focus on the NHL playoffs, and I always considered the World Championships. You know, if the NHL playoffs was the NCAA tournament, I always refer to the World Championships as the NIT, as like like a secondary tournament. And you know, I know it had more focus in Europe where you know it's definitely more important, but you can tell the importance of the World Championships now on the international and on the NHL stage by all the general managers that are over there right now. I mean, most of the NHL general managers are over at the World Championships looking for new talent. I know that Brendan Shanahan and Kyle Dubas are over there for the Maple Leafs, and a number of other general managers are there as well. You know, and that's where Mike Babcock is, and he may even be doing his negotiations for his new job there because everybody is there. So it definitely has more importance than it did a few years ago, and I think in the age of needing content, like TSN or Sportsnet or any of the networks out there, it's going to get more exposure because it is content when all there is left is the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? But there are so many plots going on in this thing. I mean, and normally there's excitement, but this is just full of plots. Like we look at the final and the Final Four in the NHL. Oh, this is a good Final Four. It's probably the best Final Four quality-wise we've had in a long time. We have 1-2 in one conference, 1-3 in the other conference. You can't really beat that, right? But yesterday you had Ovechkin flying on a plane to Russia, not knowing whether or not he was going to be able to play in a game or not. And the Russians and the Swedes tied at 3 with about 3 minutes left in the game. And this crazy, I'm sure there's that thing going on. And that was a heck of a game. The Russian-Swedish game was phenomenal. The Swedes tied up. The Swedish fans are going crazy. And then literally 10 seconds later, Malkin just gives the Russians back the lead and shuts everybody up, and it's over. And oh my gosh, so that sets up, like you said, Kevin, the awesome, always fun USA-Russia battle on the one side, which is just you can't get around that. USA having already beaten this Russian team, but not with Ovechkin in it, obviously. Now Ovechkin's going to play tomorrow. I mean, he's got to be spent. I mean, he comes off a too long playoff series. But now he's flown across the world, but we'll see what he's made of tomorrow. I mean, that's going to be something to watch. And this U.S. team is another incredible story because this is your typical U.S. team in the world. So this is where you have the Canadians have really stepped it up, the Russians have stepped it up, right? This is like Krug, Ty. Krug has become this monstrous player, for the Americans. And we talk about him all year. I mean, what have been your thoughts, Ty?
Well, I mean, for me, I look at it from the Bruins' point of view, just trying to gauge where they're at. And I think Krug is, they signed him to that big contract, and he wants to earn top 4 minutes, and he's playing top 4 minutes for the U.S. He's playing both power play and penalty killing. I thought Louis Eriksson was a fantastic player for Sweden in this series.
Really good.
Yeah, and that just kind of shows you that some of these guys that you don't really look at as, the star players of, this team or that team, they rise to the occasion here, and it shows you what they have when they don, their country's colors and what a change that makes. And that's always been my favorite part about this tournament, is just see the pride that these guys have when it's playing for their team. Even though it's not the Olympics, you get that sense that they are just so thrilled, and there's an extra gear because they are playing for their country that really makes these games entertaining. It makes it really special, especially I think we were talking about for a team like the Czech Republic or like Slovakia. These guys, they put so much pressure on themselves because this is such a great honor, especially when it's in their home country. Like in the Czech Republic right now, you can definitely tell that these guys love it right now. I mean, especially Yager. I mean, this guy's just relishing this moment right now. And I mean, it's always fun for me, but it's really starting to feel like it's sort of on the same level, as the playoffs now in terms of the intensity, in terms of the passion that you see out there. And that's not always been the case. So this has been the most fun I've had personally watching this tournament in a very long time.
Oh yeah, it gives you the feeling of it's like a surprise Olympics that just showed up on your lap. Suddenly it's always been good, but now wait a second, there's games on during the day that are this exciting and this important, and it's all of a sudden, and that's, I mean, Yager has 7 goals now, and every time he touches the puck in this tournament, it's like a god is touching the puck in this arena. I mean, it's the place is absolutely. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The reaction he gets, literally, probably for sneezing, he'll get a standing ovation. They are so into Jaromir Yager, it's insane. Yesterday, when he's had so many great chances before he tied it, he was making moves that he made 20 years ago on players, and you're like, wait a second, you're 40 plus years old, this is something else, and what he's doing is just, I mean, and it's, and I'm a big Yager guy now, and I wasn't always, because I had my run-ins with Yager before he went to Russia, but now when Yager came back, I've been so pro Yager for all the things I've seen, and he's become such a good teammate, and now he's doing this over there for and Eric, like you said, such a waning system in the Olympics. The Czech coaching was being called into play. The Czech coaching is terrible. Who do they have left? Voracek is good, but who's else is coming up? But here's my question for you, Eric. Let's pretend for a second that Canada beats Czechs, which they should, because that would the Canada-Czech game equate to the U.S. 1980 Miracle on Ice game if the U.S. were to win that game?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, a more appropriate example would be the Czechs beating Canada in the Olympics in Nagano.
Okay.
That was a game that I covered, and I remember we were on these crazy middle-of-the-night deadlines, and it was a funny game because it was the ice was really tilted in one way. I mean, Canada outplayed them dramatically in the game, but they gave up an early goal, and they pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally Trevor Linden tied it with about 5 minutes to go in regulation, and so it went to overtime, and the Czechs basically weren't even trying to score a goal. They were trying to get to the shootout, so they would dump it in, and they were backing 5 players up, and the Canadians came in waves and waves and waves, and you just had the sense of sitting there that they weren't going to get one more past Hasek, and then when it went to the shootout, I mean, you had Patrick Waugh at one end and you had Dominic Hasek at the other, the 2 dominant goaltenders of their generation, both future Hall of Famers, and the difference was Robert Reichel off the goalpost into the net on the first Czech shot, and then Wayne Gretzky on the bench, and Canada not able to get one past Hasek. And the celebration, I mean, the guy that scored the winning goal, Robert Reichel, I knew pretty well because he started his career in Calgary. He came out, and you could just tell, I've never seen him so overcome by emotion, because it just mattered. It just mattered. They were a freshly minted country. This was the first time the NHLers were in the Olympics. They were not given a great opportunity because they took about 10 players from the Czech Republic. They didn't take all their NHLers, and so that was you're referencing a David and Goliath confrontation. Yeah. That's what that was, and so for the Czechs to win that mattered a lot. And I think you could make a similar comparison to this particular game. If the Czechs were to beat a Canadian team, if it was the Canadian team from last year, if it was the run-of-the-mill World Championship team where you have serviceable NHLers in the lineup, guys trying to make names for themselves, it would not resonate the same. But Sidney Crosby is there. Tyler Seguin is there. I mean, these are players that, like, sophisticated hockey fans in the Czech Republic understand that this is a packed Canadian team, which you don't often see at the World Championships, and certainly not this early in the Olympic quadrennial. Like, what ends up happening is Hockey Canada starts sending the message out, in 2016, 2017. If you want to be considered for the Olympic team, and if you're one of those bubble guys, we strongly urge you to go to a World Championship, because then we can see you on bigger international ice and we can evaluate your commitment to the country. So a lot of times with that, now, I hate to use the term blackmail, but really that's what it is. They use that as a means of getting guys to go. There's almost no leverage in 2015 because it's still 3 years away, and they may not even go to the Olympics. So the fact that they got these guys, the fact that Sidney Crosby went, I mean, that nationally that was like a really big story, because not everybody is in love with Sidney Crosby anymore. There's and I think that when he went to play for Canada, it did his reputation among the people who don't like him because there are some haters out there, and he went over there, and that just enabled everybody else to sort of fall in behind them. So yeah, I don't know if it's Miracle on Ice worthy, because that really was David versus Goliath. I don't know that the gap is necessarily quite as they put it, but it's significant, and so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But at home on the big ice, because that's the other thing I wanted to say, the tournament is being played on the big ice. It doesn't always enhance the quality of play. play. I'm not a big fan of big ice hockey, but there are certain players that use the big ice to their advantage, and I think Yager is one of them.
Yeah.
Yager played those years in Russia in the Continental Hockey League, and I think that there are players, even European players that come to North America and play most of their career in North America, they get lost on the big ice. I see Swedes out there that don't know how to play on the big ice. You see other Czechs, you see Russians that don't know how to play on the big ice, but Yager knows how to play on the big ice. He's aware of every extra inch that he has out there, and I think that one of the reasons he's able to play and have the impact that he's had in this tournament is because he's been able to adapt to that, and not everybody else on his team or in the tournament have been able to do that.
That's a great point. And what's happening here, which is amazing, is Yager is getting this kind of space that like 1990s Yager gets, because people are realizing that he's just at the top of his game. So you're seeing really quality defensemen back off of him, which is amazing. And that space is also making him, of course, a better player. I mean, he might be the best or the hardest player to take the puck away from, in all time. I mean, it's like he has another person blocking his body from the puck. It's as if there's a whole thing there. But yeah, I mean, what he is doing, just now, and then of course, if we get to the U.S. Canada, if that happens for whatever reason, if the U.S. beats Russia, and then you have another David versus Goliath type battle, because this U.S. team's first line we talked about yesterday, is Eichel. And so this is
Trevor Lewis and
Eichel, Trevor Lewis, and
Brock Nelson.
Brock Nelson, right? I mean, going against Crosby, Sagan, and Giroux, or whatever.
Yeah, it sounds like a fair battle to me.
I know. I mean,
but hey, guys, one game, right? One game.
Right?
That's not best of seven. I always say that.
Are they going to play? Are they going to play Kurt Russell's speech from Miracle?
They'd have to, yeah.
For the game,
And the U.S. goalie situation is also crazy, I mean, because it's just really fascinating. I mean, I'm just sitting back thinking, man, where is Jonathan Quick? Like, Jonathan Quick needs to be there for these guys, and he's not. But like you said, I mean, we have the possibility now of a Crosby Ovechkin gold medal game that also play. There's so many stories. It's just awesome. So tomorrow, get up early in the morning, make yourself some popcorn and soup, and just hang out all day, because you got that, and then you get the conference finals after that. So let's move on to the NHL. But really, you got to watch it, because I know people. I've never really been a huge proponent. I mean, it's much more of a big deal in Canada. It hasn't been televised in the U.S. until the last few years. So we never really. It was sort of one of those tournaments that didn't exist for very many Americans. But now you got to watch it. You just have to. It's Olympic worthy right now, and there's so many stories. It's awesome. So that's my official plug. And NBC should send me their check, because there you go. Let's get on to the conference finals, because so we're gonna start with I guess we'll start in the East, because you've got a classic battle here between New Yorkers and then where New Yorkers go to die, Tampa. So you've got the whole you've got that going on. As in the famous Seinfeld quote, "My parents live in Florida because it's the law." So this is, and you've got of course a big trade that happened between these teams. You got St. Louis returning back. I'm loving this. I mean, Ty, what are your thoughts on this series?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably, if I had to put my money on it, these are the two best teams in the Eastern Conference, and this is what you want, right? You want to see the two best, and I just think that Tampa and New York. I mean, this is a great story. I think when you have Callahan and St. Louis, visiting their old cities. I know it's been a footnote. I know they've kind of already been to the buildings, for the first time and what have you, but. I mean, over the course of a 7-game series, it's going to give both fan bases a great chance to taunt the other player, which is always fun. As being someone here in Boston and witnessing the Phil Kessel Boston series that year, that was a lot of fun for everybody involved.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I think this is what you want. These are the two best teams. Both have some flaws that I think the other team can expose, and that's what you want. I mean, this is really like a coin flip for me. I think the Rangers have been the class of the East for a very long time, this season I should say, but I think Tampa was right behind them, and at certain points I thought Tampa was better than the Rangers. So this is everything you want, like I said, and I just think that this is going to be a series that really sort of captures a lot of people's eyes, more so than they're expecting when they just see Tampa Bay and New York. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I agree. Mike.
I mean, it's one thing with Callahan being, the former captain of the Rangers, and San Luis being, the franchise player even before Stamkos with Tampa Bay. I mean, you've got Brian Boyle, you've got Anton Strom, you've got, I mean, there are a number. You've got Dan Boyle who won a Stanley Cup in Tampa in 2004. So the cross pollination of these two teams is definitely going to be a factor. I think also the factor is Tampa Bay is coming in to this series relatively healthy. I mean, Ryan Callahan is skating at 4 days or 3 or 4 days after an emergency appendectomy, and he's expected probably to play in Game 1. Whereas Zuccarello is a question mark for the Rangers. He didn't play the entire series against Washington. San Luis sat the third period and some of the overtime for the Rangers. They don't know if it's injury related or if it was just exhaustion or he just wasn't playing that well. Plus, Dan Boyle took that hit from Brooks Orpik. And you don't know if he was. I assume he was concussed based on the way he was reacting coming off the ice. Whether he'll be in the lineup or they'll have to put Matt Hunwick in there. I mean, all those factors, I think weigh into what the final outcome of this series is going to be. I think they're two of the fastest teams in the league, and it's going to be like a 100-meter dash going back and forth. I don't know if you want my prediction of what the series is going to end up.
Hold off on the predictions till the very end here. After we all talk. But yeah, I definitely agree. The speed is the thing. What are your thoughts on this, Eric?
Yeah, well, I think it's Tampa's offense against New York's defense. I mean, the one thing I haven't, because I've been immersed in the series in the West and covering them, I haven't been able to see all of the games involving those two teams. So, I'm ducking in and out, and at times both of them have looked really good to me, and at times they've looked very average to me. But the one thing about Tampa is that, they had the number one offense among the teams that made the playoffs this year. The nominal second line has been terrific, and it looks to me like Steven Stamkos is starting to come out of whatever funk he was in. And so I think that the fact that they've got, that they can come at you with waves and waves of offense as opposed to New York, which is, trying to win every game by a single goal. I think it'll be fun to watch, but I wonder, like if New York's defense, I mean, Dan Boyle, whether he plays or not, I mean, it's the top four in New York that get all the minutes from Nino and that really are the difference makers. So they have enough shutdown defensemen in New York on those two pairs that allows them to check Johnson's line and to check Stamkos' line. So can these guys get away from the effects of having to play against the likes of Girardi and McDonough and Stahl, who've just been dynamite in a shutdown role. Because Tampa just has been a much more fun team to watch when I've had a chance to tune in, and the fact that they were able to beat Carey Price leads me to believe that they should be able to do the same for Henrik Lundqvist.
And ironically, I think the key matchup here is Tampa Bay's depth at forward against. I think the Rangers are more of a 2 or 3 line deep team. Their fourth line has not been the greatest, and the guys like James Shepard and Jesper Fast and JT Miller are the ones who replaced the Brian Boyles and some of the guys who went to Tampa Bay. So that battle of the third and fourth line, I think, is going to be key to the outcome of the series. I personally think Tampa is the deeper team at forward. I think the Rangers are the superior team on the blue line, and Lundqvist, I think, has a clear advantage over Bishop. But I think the offense of Tampa Bay is much better than the Rangers.
Yeah, I think for me, I was saying that I think. I look at these two teams, and I look at how close that series with the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals really was, and you wonder, does that propel you, or does that exhaust you? We've seen both sides from different teams, and I think the same thing with Tampa Bay, where they took that 3-0 series lead, and then they had, it was a close series. It was 6 games. They only lost 2 games there, and obviously that's better than forcing Game 7, but still that has an effect for it. It starts to either create doubt or it gets you going. So for both of these teams, the response to these long series and these brushes with death really, I think, are going to be key, and sort of whoever gets that first game, I think that can plant a seed in the other one's head really quickly. So we'll have to see there. But these sort of series, like the ones they had in the second round, they can help you or they can hurt you, really.
Well, yeah, and we talked about that on the Cranky Hockey Raiders show before, about this whole. I'm a really big fan of this theory that who you play sets you up in a big way for the next round. And when you look at who Tampa's played, the Red Wings are far more like the Rangers than the Canadians are in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're looking at a Red Wings team that gave Tampa all they could handle. It was a tough battle, and that's because the Rangers, they've got more depth, they've got more scoring options, and they come at you. Although you're right, not with 4 solid lines, they come with you with 3.5 really solid lines, and defensively though, this is where I think that Vigneault. And I've never been a fan. I mean, I'm not a Vigneault guy necessarily, but I think that he's really worn out his four players. I mean, it really feels to me like he's not using Keith Yandle enough. And now Boyle's probably not playing. I haven't heard the update on that, but that's that's a big thing. And then when you look at who Tampa has played, I mean, who the Rangers have played getting here, the Rangers have played. The Penguins were the Penguins, but the Capitals. Far more physical than anybody that Tampa's played. I mean, the people I talked to in Tampa were thrilled that the Capitals didn't win that series. They did not think Tampa matched up well against the Caps at all. That hard physical teams have given Tampa fits all year, and yet Tampa has this incredible record against. I mean, I think they've only lost 1 game, if no games, perhaps they might be like 10-0 against the 3 teams that remain in the regular season. Tampa had just these teams are teams that they really played well against. So. I don't know. I mean, my prediction. I really think that I think Tampa's the hardest team the Rangers have had to play in the playoffs in the 2 years that they've been in. This last year and this year, this is the hardest team that they've had to play. And I thought last year the Rangers got through with a relatively easy schedule. The Flyers took them actually to Game 7, and then of course the Penguins thing was a comeback, and then the Montreal Canadiens were pretty much spent by the time they got to the Rangers last year. But this Tampa team is on the upswing. So my prediction, I think I like Tampa in 6 games in this one. That'd be mine. What's yours, Mike?
Exactly the same. I think for the Rangers to win, they're going to need Nash to score a lot more. They're going to need St. Louis to find the fountain of youth. They're going to need Zuccarello to come back and contribute. I think that's too much to hope for. I think Lundqvist has the definite advantage over Bishop in a head-to-head matchup.
Yeah.
But I think the offense of Tampa Bay and the general lack of offense of the Rangers sort of counterbalances that. So I think Tampa will win in 6 games.
Yeah. Ty?
This is so hard for me because I look at last round and I think Braden Coburn and Andre Schuster were just a disaster of a pairing. And I feel like the Rangers' speed can exploit them a little bit.
Yeah.
I got to stick with what I've been saying all year. I got to go Rangers in 7.
Rangers in 7. Yeah, I could see it. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think New York's window to win is now, and Tampa's window to win is coming up. But having said that, I like the momentum that Tampa has created in these playoffs. I often think that if the team gets tested in the first round, as the Lightning did against the Red Wings, and you win a series that you're supposed to win, and you have this collective exhalation from, we didn't stumble in the first round, I think you just play with more confidence the rest of the way through. And the other thing is that I really like what I've seen, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Victor Hedman has taken the strides in the playoffs that we thought we were going to see in the regular season. I don't know if you remember, but first month of the season, I think Hedman had like 7 points in the first 4 games.
Yes.
And they were talking about him like 2 weeks in as a Norris Trophy candidate. And he was, he had such a great finish last year, and then, he had such a great start, and then he got hurt. And then his season seemed to go off the rails. He was hurt a couple of times, and he never really got back on track. And I believe, because I remember talking to him in New York at the the player media tour, and wondering, asking him, where are you going, and how good can you be, and we talked about Swedish defensemen in the NHL and the impact that they're having, especially these young ones. And so I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for him to find his game again in the regular season. It never seemed to me that he quite got there, but I think he's gotten there in the playoffs. It looks to me like we're 1 month in, and every time I look up, he is carrying the puck. Like, you're talking about Yager and the wingspan. Well, Hedman's got that from the blue line, so he has the ability to carry the puck. He has the ability to shoot the puck. He has the ability to defend against the biggest forwards in the game. I mean, he's a complete defenseman in all 3 zones. And as much as I like collectively New York's defense, I don't know that they necessarily have a weapon like Hedman. And so I mean, you're all right. It's a flip of the coin. And sometimes, if you get off to a good start in this series, one team goes up and one team goes down. At the end of it's like, wow, a sweep. We didn't see that coming. But it just feels like Tampa, because of the momentum that they've gained and where they're at in terms of their mindset. I'm going to pick them. I'm going to pick them. I'll pick it in 7. And I don't do that with any great conviction, but I just think that there's enough there in terms of the offense that they've gotten from their top 6 and the way Hedman has played in these playoffs that lead me to think that they can beat them. And while I'll acknowledge that that the gap in goal is pretty significant, the same thing would have been said, Carey Price versus Ben Bishop, and it didn't hurt the Lightning to against the best goaltender.
And not that I would assume too much here, but I saw it. Somebody post that if Tampa beats the Rangers, goes on to beat the Chicago Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup Final, that they will be the first team to ever beat 4 original 6 teams on the way to the Stanley Cup.
Well, there you go. That's an interesting stat. And of course, some Rangers fan got Chris Kreider shaved into his head. That's pretty
creepy,
random,
man. That's creepy.
That is creepy and extremely random. I mean,
That's a good look.
It's a good look.
Chris Kreider, because he saved their season, right? Wasn't he the guy that scored with 1:44 to go when they were facing elimination? I mean, that's the other thing, is that the Rangers came this close to not even being there. So
if it gets to a Game 7, then I'm gonna be wavering on my prediction. That's why I picked Tampa in 6.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. If it gets to Game 7, how do you pick against Lundqvist and the Rangers at home in Game 7? That's the hard thing. I mean, they just are unbeatable there. That's the tough. I mean, Lundqvist. You know what's weird about Lundqvist? And it's very different than Carey Price in my mind in so many ways, right? But is equally good. But Lundqvist always looks a little bit nervous to me. And even though it's weird for a goalie who's that dominant and that good to always kind of look exasperated. But sometimes you get this sense that Lundqvist is exasperated by things on the ice. He gets frustrated, and it's just where
he's exasperated by the fact that his team can't score more than a couple goals.
Yeah, and it's that, and it's other thing. We've seen Lundqvist, and Bishop has the same thing. Bishop's also an emotional goalie, where gosh, that Holtby was just stone cold. He was completely solid, and I don't know. And of course, we have to do in the tradition of predicting this series. I have to use my son's prediction method, which you always throw in there, which is the method of if you were to throw the 2 teams' logos, mascots, into a pit together, who would come out? And in this case, you have a lightning bolt and a park ranger. So I don't think the park ranger has much of a chance. So I think this is if you go by the Owen method, it's the lightning all the way.
Well, I mean, this comes back to my theory that if you have a goaltender that hasn't started 70 games, he has a greater chance of winning the Stanley Cup, and I think that's why I'm going with the Rangers here. There's not as much wear and tear on Lundqvist, even with a Game 7 overtime, as there is on Ben Bishop, and I just think that's a huge reason why. I mean, I think last year Lundqvist, you saw the way he collapsed on the ice, when the Kings won the Cup, and you just had this feeling as if he's never going to get this close again, and it's almost like he felt that way too. But they're back there. They're back in the driver's seat here. They can win now. I think this is their year, and I just think he understands that challenge and he's going to meet it. I just think he's there.
Though, that's a bit of his. When I covered the game where the Flyers beat the Rangers in the shootout, right, to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I went into the locker room, and I never saw a goalie look more physically and mentally just drained. Like Lundqvist does. Some guys bounce back quickly. He just doesn't. In a similar way, where when you see him interviewed after games that he's won, he looks like he never expected in a million years they would have won this game. He looks completely excited, thrilled that they won it, and he's just one of those guys, which is very rare for goalies to be successful, who are like emotional roller coasters like that. But he's managed to do it, which is something, saying something. So Eric, let's go to you for the West, because you definitely have a better grip on this series. This is such a fascinating series. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, another coin flip, because I wrote a piece for today's paper on Ryan Kessler being the X factor in the series, and I really believe that. And the premise of the piece was simply this: Anaheim was the number 1 and number 2 in the regular season the last couple of years, stumbled 1 year in the first round, 1 year in the second round, and finally realized that they cannot get through the Western Conference with only Ryan Getzlaf as their number 1 center. So if you look at who played center for them last year, Saku Koivu was there. They had Nick Bonino there, and they had Matthew Perreault, and that was really the guys that played center for them. So Koivu retired, Bonino got traded for Kessler, and Perreault was allowed to leave as an unrestricted free agent. So they brought in Nate Thompson, who's a fourth-line guy, but the coach loves him, and Ricard Raquel, a player that they drafted, has had a chance to come in and play regularly. So they've changed 3/4 of the center ice group there, and the stats may not necessarily show it, although the face-off stats certainly do. But Ryan Kessler has been a monster in these playoffs. He has been phenomenal. Like against Calgary, I would say he was their most important forward, more so than Getzlaf with 8 points in the first 3 games, more so than Perry, who scored the overtime winner to clinch it. Those guys were great too, but Kessler has won a bunch of face-offs. They used him to check Sean Monahan, like Calgary's #1 center. He's turned Jakob Silfverberg into a terrific scorer. So Anaheim is way deeper than they were, and the reason that they're playing in the conference final is because they have Ryan Kessler. Now Chicago, similar situation. Last year they stumbled in the conference final against Los Angeles and just determined that with Michael Handzus as your #2 guy and Shaw as your #3, you just can't win in today's NHL. So they went out there and tried to get supplementary help at center. But because of their cap situation, the best they were able to do was to get Brad Richards, who's been okay for them, and then at the trade deadline, Anton Vermette. Again, just okay. So when I think about the way these teams have changed, 12 months, I think Anaheim has made significant strides, and Chicago has kind of just sort of hovered there. So I just think that Kessler is going to play against Taves, and if he can be as good as he can be, and if he can negate Taves at all, then I don't see that Chicago has an answer for Getzlaf. So on the one hand, there is a part of me that says I like Anaheim in a close series, but the other part to me is the goaltending, and I haven't been able to sort this out in my own mind, because I watched Frederik Andersen for 2 series, and I believe his goals against average currently is under 2, and yet you were talking about like Lundqvist looks nervous at times out there. Well, Andersen, about 3 or 4 different times in these series, I kept thinking that the hook is coming, and it never did. He just doesn't look as confident in the goal as his statistics would suggest he is. And so then you look at Chicago, well, are you going to get Corey Crawford from the first round, who was atrocious, or Corey Crawford in the second round, where a very good Minnesota team couldn't buy a goal? And I look at where the goaltending is trending, and if Crawford is the goalie that he was in the second round, in the third round, and if Andersen wavers at all, does the edge in goal in Chicago balance out against the Kessler edition, and the fact that Anaheim just has a better center ice core, and I don't know the answer to that. So I won't make a prediction. I'll just say that those are the 2 factors that I've isolated in this particular series that I think will one or the other is going to ultimately determine who wins.
See, I think the 2 key matchups, and as Eric said, the matchup of Taves versus either Getzlaf or Kessler, probably Kessler, because I think Kessler is the better two-way guy and has had experience facing Taves in the playoffs before. But the other thing is the shorthanded Chicago defense against Anaheim, and I think what Bruce Boudreau is going to do is he's going to have his forwards paste the Chicago defense, because you're without Roosevelt. They're probably going to have to put Rundblad in there as the 6th defenseman. He probably is not going to play more than 10 minutes a night. The number 5 defenseman is Timonen, who so far in the playoffs has averaged 9 minutes a game, which means that Oduya, Yarmulson, Seabrook, and Keith are going to probably play at least over 25 minutes, and I know Keith is probably will play over 30 minutes. So he's going to have guys like Bolesky and Maroon and all their forwards nail these guys constantly, and they hopefully for in Anaheim's point of view, late in the games they get worn down, or late in the series they get worn down, and that could be the difference between winning and losing. I think that's the way Anaheim is going to approach it. Chicago, I think they're just going to throw their speed and their talent against Anaheim. You always underestimate. You look at the Hawks. I mean, everybody thought that Minnesota was going to give them a run for their money, and it was a 4-game sweep. And the thing is, the Hawks got a lot of rest in between the second round and the start of this conference final, so a lot of these players are going to be very fresh. Anaheim, played 5 games against Calgary, so they're not going to exactly be worn out themselves. But I think that long rest is going to help the Blackhawks against the Ducks.
Yeah, Ty.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of rest, I mean, Patrick Kane gave him another week or so to rest up, right? I mean,
right.
That's such a huge part of all of this, I think. But no, I think at the same time you have a tough task at hand here with the Anaheim Ducks and how physical they are. And when I look at the Chicago Blackhawks, I don't think they faced a team that has a net front presence of a Maroon or Corey Perry in the first 2 rounds. I mean, what's the closest thing? Nino Niederreiter and Chris Stewart? I mean, that's probably the closest you had to, some big body dudes that can bang around the front of the net.
Right.
And I don't think that. I mean, that's going to be a huge challenge, especially when they're shorthanded defensively, and especially when Kimmo Timonen's going to be relied upon, especially in the games in Anaheim where they're going to have last change. They can expose these guys. They can expose a Rundblad or a Timonen, or even Oduya, who I don't think has had the greatest of seasons. So that's going to be a huge thing for Anaheim too. But for me, Corey Crawford, he posted a 9.47 in the second round. I mean, that's totally seemed like he had the demons that were in his head in the first round out. And that's such a huge thing for the Blackhawks, especially when they're defensively shorthanded, like Mike said. And I think that when you look at their speed and what's going on for the Blackhawks right now, just everything seems to be working. And when that happens, this is a dangerous team, as we all know. I mean, these guys are the closest thing to a dynasty we're probably going to have, just based on how many appearances they've been to now in the conference finals. So I just think that experience is going to pay off here. I just like the Blackhawks. But what Mike said, the physicality and the size advantage for Anaheim is going to be the biggest hurdle, I think.
Yep, you guys are nailing it. I kind of agree with a lot of what you're saying. I don't think we've ever had 2 teams that enter the conference finals with as much confidence as these 2 teams have. Like it's like you talk about the East, and both of those teams, like you said, Ty, both of the teams in the East have been stretched and actually have faced their own, imminent death, have put on the skates before a game, not knowing if that was going to be their last game. Neither of these teams have. I mean, both of these teams have rolled, and both these teams, when they've been challenged, have more than, I mean, Anaheim made Winnipeg look silly at times with their confidence. I mean, Anaheim was like Anaheim was toying with Winnipeg. Winnipeg would score a goal, the crowd would go crazy, and Anaheim would just come back 30 seconds later and score another one. And they did this with Calgary too. And I just think that the last year we had the Kings and Chicago in what was probably one of the most epic series we've ever had. This Ducks team is a lot more like that Kings team when you add Kessler into it.
And the thing, Ak, is it was an epic series, but the Kings had Jonathan Quick.
Well, that's what I'm going to say, yeah, because at the end of the day, that was the difference, right, where Jonathan Quick comes in. And like you're saying, Eric, Anderson is sort of, we don't know. Like we just don't know. He has come up big at times, and against Calgary, he came up big at times in the last game, but we just don't know. And he could step up and be incredible, in which case then I think Anaheim takes it. I mean, Anaheim's got to be more rested in some ways, even though both these teams are pretty rested, so maybe that probably doesn't matter. Anaheim, on paper, has had an easier route there, but that's, I don't know. I mean, to me, I guess I have such a tough time going against Chicago in these things. It's just so hard to go against them, but
Well, who I think is going to make a difference in Chicago? The guys that can get to the front of the net, because what I saw of Anderson, and especially in the round against Calgary, I covered every game, was that point, one-on-one, Anderson was very good. The goals that got past him were the ones that came from screens and tips. And so can Chicago get to the front of the net? So Brian Bickle, he will be an important factor in the series. Players like that,
right?
Because if you can get traffic in front of Anderson, if you isolate the goals that he gave up, just look at the players in front. He didn't see the puck. That's what it was. He's a big guy. And the goals that eluded him are the ones where he didn't see it and it found a way through the pad or wherever. He's very good one-on-one. He's a guy that is quite athletic for a big man, and I think has a ton of confidence. That's the other thing. When you speak to Frederik Andersen, you don't think young goalie nervous. You think of a guy that just has an inordinate amount of confidence for someone who hasn't been in the league for a very long period of time. So, can those guys, Bickle at different times in different playoffs has been a really important factor. One of the reasons they went out and re-signed him after they won the Cup and let other guys like Bolin go. And I think that he will be critical. Like if you're trying to isolate somebody, maybe a lesser player on any team that can make a difference, it will be him. To your point about rust versus rest, I mean, Anaheim has played one game over the minimum. Like one, right? Because they swept
Yeah.
Winnipeg and they took Calgary out in 5, and I think they only played 4 or 5 games in the final 12 games of the season. So I can't remember, not just this year, but going back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I can't remember a team that is so rested and it is running on all, on firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, James Wisniewski has not played a game in these playoffs. He is the number 7 defenseman on the roster. If they get an injury, they can move James Wisniewski into the lineup. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, I mean, I've made this joke last year, like he would have played as the number 4 on Calgary. Calgary had exactly the same issue that Chicago had. You know, with Mark Giordano out, they had to rely on 3 defensemen to play 30 minutes a night, and they did wear down at the end. They just weren't as good. When Anaheim had the cycle going in the zone, the Kessler line and the Getzlaf line, they would control possession for 30, 40, 45 seconds, and those young defensemen in Calgary, the guys that they were overplaying through the final month of the season and into the first round and into the second round, they just didn't have it in their legs anymore. So how much is going to be there? How much does this week off, or 9 days, I guess, for Chicago, restore the 100, like gets Keith to 100%, gets Seabrook to 100%. So maybe the first 4 games you don't notice fatigue, and then if it gets to 5, if it gets to 6, if it gets to 7, suddenly that's when it pays off. But personnel-wise, if you're just isolating the 18 position players on Chicago and the 18 position players on Anaheim, it shouldn't be a contest. Anaheim has the better 18. But that doesn't always translate into who wins a series, because Kane is so dynamic. Taves has so much experience coming up in the big games. And frankly, Getzlaf and Perry, though they played with Taves on those Olympic teams, the last couple of years when they lost in 7 to Detroit 2 years ago, when they lost to Los Angeles last year in 7 games, the big players on Anaheim didn't get it done, whereas the big players on Chicago have historically over the last 5 years gotten it done when it matters the most.
And a factor as well will be Corey Perry's health status, because he got hit low in the last game against Calgary. Hasn't skated since in practices. They may just be playing it safe, and he'll play in game 1. But I mean, him at a limited ability, would affect Anaheim a lot. Also, their defense has really exceeded expectations right now. I mean, Francois Beauchemin is a solid veteran guy, won a cup in 07 with them, but Lindholm, Vatanen, Fowler, they've been really, really solid, and they're going to have to deal with a lot of annoying forwards from the Blackhawks, guys like Andrew Shaw, who like to get into people's kitchen, and Bickle is a big body who likes to go to the front of the net. And if they, this will be the toughest challenge that they had. I mean, I like Winnipeg's forwards, but they didn't seem to have a problem with them. And Calgary, I love what Calgary did this year, but they still need some bolstering up front to really be a team that's threatening. Chicago is going to pose the most problem to that defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. So prediction-wise, Ty, where are you?
I go Blackhawks in 6.
All
I just can't go against them.
Mike?
Blackhawks in 7. It's going to be equal to or above the epic battle of last year. It's going to be a war.
And what do you think, Eric?
I'll take Anaheim in 7, but not with any great conviction. I mean, I can usually see a New York-Chicago final, and I mean, this is the larger issue, and why it's so hard to make these predictions is because in today's National Hockey League, because of parity, there's an awful lot of very good teams, but there are no great teams. When I started covering hockey, there were great teams, and it was hard to beat a great team. I mean, sometimes it happened. Sometimes one team that was 30 points in arrears of another team, would knock them out, and it would be like an upset for the ages. But to me, there are no upsets anymore. The gap between the team with the lowest point total, Calgary at 97, and the Rangers was not that great. It amounts to 1 victory a month over the course of a regular season. There's an awful lot of very good teams. There's 5 or 6 very good teams, that miss the playoffs altogether. So, you want to isolate all of these things, and it comes out 51-49. And so, how do you make a pick in that situation? So, I mean, if Frederik Andersen stops enough pucks, I think Anaheim is going to win. But I worry. I mean, if they've switched to John Gibson at some point in the series, then all bets are off.
Well, I'm going to go off Kevin Allen's theory that the NHL finals are always about what makes things the most inconvenient to cover them.
So Anaheim, Tampa.
Exactly. Anaheim, Tampa. No, it's not even close, right? I mean, come on. Chicago, New York is a cheap one to cover for me. I get to fly back and forth. There's tons of flights between New York and Chicago. Anaheim and Tampa, totally different ball of wax. Long, really long, arduous flights. I just think that
I mean, New York to Anaheim would be convenient. Lots of non-stop flights.
No, there are lots of flights, but that's still a long, long flight. New York to Chicago is an hour and a half. So, that's the most convenient. So throw the most convenient away. Anaheim. Yep, I'm going to say Anaheim in 6. It could go any which way for sure.
What a difference a rating scheme would be too.
Oh my gosh,
Anaheim and Tampa versus New York and Chicago. I mean,
there is no question.
Unbelievable.
There is no question who the NHL is pulling for in the back rooms because this is the Anaheim Ottawa series that I covered, that was a tough one because there was a lot of the ratings on that. There were not many people covering that series. It was incredibly thin as far as the amount of people this one could be like that. Anaheim and Tampa, if we hit that for sure. It's not gonna be hard to get in the press box on that one, I don't think. But I don't even know if you're gonna do auxiliary press boxes, but we'll see. It's gonna be interesting. I'm pulling for that. I'm pulling. I kind of am pulling for the Anaheim Tampa one, even though it is inconvenient. That's where I do differ from Kevin because I like the idea of those two teams, and the Rangers were just there last year. I think Tampa is an exciting. I also like to reward exciting hockey. Like I like that Tampa plays this really exciting, upbeat style, and I like that it's a copycat league, and I want more teams to play that style. So,
well, I think you have 3 of the 4 teams who are basically speed teams.
They are. Not
that Anaheim is slow, but I think the Rangers, Tampa, and Chicago are all speed first. I mean, you got to have a hard time
imagining. Yeah, I have a hard time imagining either the Rangers or Tampa beating either Anaheim or Chicago as well. So when I think about that one, that's a tough one because it just seems like they match up. Anaheim really would give Tampa fits, I think. If they were afraid of the Capitals, they better.
I think Tampa could beat Chicago. Yeah.
You think Tampa could beat Chicago? Possibly. Well, that was a great show, guys.
It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. Whole thing. You can throw a dart at the wall. All 4 of these teams.
Yeah, probably true. But Ty, nothing more exciting than what's going on in your town with the football team. My gosh, holy cow!
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. No, I can't wait. I mean, yeah. that whole incident has made me go dark on Twitter. I'm not doing it anymore. Well, I'm sick of deflated footballs. I'm sick of Tom Brady. I'm sick of it. I'm done.
Yeah.
We have to calm your concerns, Ek, because it came out today. Mark Bergevin in a press conference in Montreal made sure to say that Michael Therrien and his entire coaching staff will be back next season.
Oh, of course they'll be back. Yeah. No, they will. I'm going to not comment on that though. I'm not a Therrien fan. I will take Vigneault over Therrien any day of the week. All right, guys, that's all the time we have. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games tomorrow. Remember, and Sunday, of course, is the finals in the World. So we have, that. And then if Ovechkin loses this game, we'll be able to talk more about the other thing I was going to talk about today, which is kind of the ridiculous story that was written over the weekend, I thought, about Ovechkin being the biggest choker of all time in hockey. We don't have to go there. But we'll see what happens. I think the guy deserves some credit for flying over to play in this tournament. I mean, that's a big deal. And he's always been there for Russia, but this does make up for a lot of, I know he feels horrible about what happened in the Olympics, but this is a heck of a big deal to go over there.
Yeah.
So all right, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.